Good morning, my dear student. Welcome back. Today we are going to continue our reading of the story called Anansi and the Snake. In the previous class, we have seen that the mischievous Anansi had accepted the challenge of a tiger, that it would either capture the snake or be killed by the tiger. And we have also seen that Anansi had failed in its first attempt to capture the snake. And now we will see what would be the next move of Anansi. Let us continue today's reading from page 24. Second paragraph. The next morning, Anansi was back in front of Snake's house. This time, it had a spade. Spade means that's some sharp metal with which you would pick the ground, the earth from the ground, okay? And he was digging a hole in Snake's path. When the hole was dug, Anansi smeared its sides with grease. Smeared means making a mess. Then he covered it up with dry palm leaves and scattered dirt on them so that it looked perfectly natural. Then he sat down behind a tree and waited. Soon Snake came slithering and sliding down the path. He saw the dusty palm leaves in his way and tapped them slightly with his head. Down they fell into a greasy pit. Snake carried on. He was so long that he just made a bridge of himself with his head on one side of the pit and his tail on the other, and he slithered away. Now, in this paragraph, we have seen the second trick of Anansi in order to capture a snake. What Anansi did was he digged a hole in the way of the snake, and he made a mess of that hole by pouring this grease, that sticky oily thing, okay, in that hole that it has dug. He thought that he would trap the snake would fall into the hole, and then he will capture the snake that way. But he did not succeed, because when the snake came that way, the snake saw that there were some palm leaves on the ground, and so it tapped that palm leaves with the head. Okay, tap means hit that palm leaves with the head, and the palm leaves fell into the hole that was dug by Anansi. And so the snake lifted its head and created a bridge over the hole that Anansi had made. Okay, it made a bridge of himself. On one side of the hole there was the head of a snake, and on the other the tail. And in this way the snake escaped from Nancy's hand again. Next morning, Anansi went to the river and cut a long bamboo hole, longer than Snake. He dragged the pole up the pathway to Snake's house. The snake looked out to see what Anansi was doing. "Morning, Anansi," said the snake. "Good morning, Mr. Snake." "Anansi," said Snake, "I am beginning to get vexed." Vexed here means disappointed, angry. Okay? "One day you make a noose for me. Another day you dig a greasy pit. Why don't you leave me alone?" "Well," said Anansi, "I so admire you, Mr. Snake, so respect you." "Is that so?" said the snake. "Then what is the meaning of the greasy pit and the noose?" "I made a bet," confessed Anansi. "A bet? What kind of bet?" "I had a bet with Tiger that you were the longest animal in the forest." "Of course," said the snake. "Some don't believe it. Some say crocodile is longer. Some say giraffe's neck alone is longer than your whole body." Snake was really vexed now. Listen to me, Anansi, he said. Why didn't you tell me all this before? I had to capture you, said Anansi, to measure you. That's all you want to do? Measure me? That is so. Snake stared at Anansi. Stared means to look continuously. Okay, like a stare means look continuously at something. Okay. Snake stared at Anansi out of his cold black eyes. If you are lying to me, Anansi, you are dead. Anansi looked back at Snake and never blinked. Anansi the spider was a great liar. All right, agreed Snake. Measure me against a bamboo pole. Now, from these paragraphs that I have read, we can see the third trick played by Anansi, because the first and the second was a failure. And therefore, in the third trick, Anansi cut a very long pole and brought it near the snake's house. And the snake this time was very angry. And it began shouting at Anansi, telling Anansi that he is so disappointed at Anansi by annoying him with the noose, with the greasy pit, and now a bamboo. Now, Anansi said that, Mr. Snake, I'm doing all these things because I admire you. I respect you. The snake was like surprised. What kind of respect, what kind of admiration is this? If Anansi really respected the snake, then why did it bring the noose and why did it dig the greasy pit? What was that all about? Now Anansi told the snake that actually Anansi had made a bet with the tiger. Anansi told the tiger that the snake is the longest of all animals in the forest. But according to Nancy, the tiger did not believe. In fact, some animal thought that the crocodile is longer, and there are still other animals who believe that the giraffe's neck is longer than the whole body of the snake. Now the snake is really vexed, really angry. And it turned to Anansi with anger and said, "Why didn't you tell me all this before?" Now Anansi told the snake that Anansi had to capture the snake, to measure the snake, and tell the world that the snake is the longest animal. The snake is still feeling fishy about this, and therefore the snake looked at Anansi, stared at Anansi with cold eyes, and warned Anansi that if Anansi was lying to the snake, then the snake is going to kill Anansi for sure. Now Anansi looked back at the snake and never blinked. Okay, it never blinked because Anansi is a great liar. Now the snake had to agree with Anansi. Okay, and the snake, in order to prove that it is really the longest animal of all, had to let his body be measured by the spider. The snake, the poor snake, did not know that Anansi was lying to him. So the snake lay straight along the pathway, and Anansi put the long bamboo pole beside him. Anansi walked up and down, pushing and nudging, so the snake and the pole lay exactly side by side, touching. Then he walked up to the snake's head again. "This won't work," Anansi said, "because if your tail is at one end and I mark it, by the time I walk up to your head, you can move up. So you will seem even longer and I can't get a true measurement." Now you know that now the snake is already under the trap of Anansi. The snake had believed Anansi that Anansi wanted to prove to the world about the length of the snake. Prove to the world that the snake is the longest animal. Okay, and the snake also wanted to prove itself that it is the longest animal. Because the snake could not see through the tricks of Anansi. Okay, therefore the snake laid straight against the bamboo. And Anansi walked up and down, pushing and nudging so that the snake and the pole lay side by side and touching each other. Okay, then he walked up to the snake's head again and told the snake that, Mr. Snake, this will not work because at one end of the bamboo there's your tail. And when I start measuring your tail and walk up to your head, by the time I reach your head, your tail has already moved. And you will seem to be longer than you really are. And I will never be able to get the true measurement, said Anansi to the snake. Then tie my tail, said the snake. Tie my tail to that end. Now the snake asked Anansi. The snake himself told Anansi that Anansi can tie up the tail so that the tail of the snake will not move. Okay? Because if the tail moves, Anansi will not be able to get the proper measurement. So Anansi took a strong rope and tied snake's tail to one end of the bamboo pole. Then he walked back to snake's head. Your tail will hold fast, asked Anansi. Yes. Now stretch out, said Anansi. Stretch out as long as you can, and we will see how far your nose can reach. Snake stretched, and Anansi waited until Snake's eyes were closed from stretching. Then quick as a flash, he tied Snake's head to the pole as well. Then he ran to the middle and put in another tie and another and scampered up and down, tying snakes to the pole until he couldn't move an inch. Snake was captured. The word spread through the forest like fire. So now you see, Anansi was so smart that in order to get the permission of the snake for tying its tail, it lied to the snake, telling that because the snake's tail is moving and that is why he could not get proper management. And the snake agreed, gave permission to Anansi to tie its tail. Now after tying the tail, Anansi asked the snake to stretch so that he could get the proper measurement. He asked the snake to stretch as much as he can so that his length, will be longer. Okay, as long as it should be. Okay, now when the snake was stretching and stretching, what happened? The snake's eyes were closed due to stretching. Because of stretching too much, his eyes were closed. And as soon as the snake's eyes were closed, quickly Anansi ran to the head of the snake and tied the head. After tying the head, it ran to the middle of the body and tie that body also. And then tie again and again, okay, until the snake was tightly tied to the pole. And it was so tightly tied up to the pole that the snake could not even move an inch. This is how the snake was captured. And this news ran throughout the forest like wildfire. So how the news spread? The monkey told parrots and parrot told bear, and all gathered to see snake tied to the bamboo pole. Anansi boasted away, I am great. From now on, I am the storyteller, and all the animal stories are Anansi stories. See, this is an African folk tales. And this is how Anansi captured the snake. Not with his physical strength, but with his mental ability, with his smartness. So, what is the value that you learn from this story? The value that we learn from this story is that, the mental ability or your smartness, your knowledge is much more powerful than physical strength. Okay, Anansi and the snake is a proof. Anansi is such a small creature, and compared to the snake is quite huge compared to the spider. But The spider was able to capture that gigantic snake only because of his smart brain. Okay, and that's why you should always keep in mind that mental strength is far greater than physical strength. Okay, the pen or the knowledge, okay, is mightier than sword of physical strength. Okay, that is all from this story. I hope you have learned the valuable lesson that the pen and the knowledge is mightier than sword of physical strength. Thank you so much.